The manila envelope landed on my desk with a soft thud that somehow felt heavier than thunder. Inside was a contract with numbers that made my vision blur. 10 times my current salary. 10 times what I'd been earning for 3 years as their lead algorithm researcher. The CEO, William Hartwell, stood behind my chair like he was waiting for me to faint from gratitude. "Read it carefully, Luna," he said, his breath warm against my ear in a way that made my skin crawl. "This is what loyalty looks like in our company. This is what happens when you prove yourself indispensable." I stared at those zeros. More money than most people see in a lifetime. Enough to buy a house, travel the world, never worry about bills again. My fingers traced the edges of the paper while William watched, probably expecting tears of joy or stammered thank yous. Instead, I closed the envelope and slid it back across my desk toward him. "I'm flattered, but no thank you." His face went through 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, fear, then back to that fake smile he wore during board meetings. "Luna, I don't think you understand. This isn't just any offer. You're the only person who fully comprehends the breakthrough algorithm we're launching with the IPO. Without you, we're looking at months of delays, maybe years. Do you know what that means?" I knew exactly what it meant. I'd been counting on it. Before I dive deeper into this story, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you're listening from? Because I want to know where my story is reaching around the world. And please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell, because what I'm about to tell you next will change how you think about justice forever. My name is Luna Chen, and 15 years ago, William Hartwell murdered my father. Not with a weapon or poison, but with something just as deadly: greed. Back then, William ran a different company called Innovative Solutions. My father, David Chen, had spent 7 years developing revolutionary software that could predict market trends with 94% accuracy. His small startup, Chen Analytics, was his whole world. He'd mortgaged our house twice to fund it, worked 18-hour days in our garage, while my mother brought him coffee and I did homework at his feet. The software worked. It worked so well that major investment firms started calling. Dad was so excited he could barely sleep. He'd finally done it, he said. He'd built something that would change our lives forever. William Hartwell heard about Dad's software through industry contacts. Instead of making a fair offer to license or partner, he decided to take everything. First, William hired away Dad's 3 key employees with offers they couldn't refuse. Then he filed 17 different patent disputes, claiming Dad's software infringed on technologies William's company had supposedly developed first. Of course, those patents were filed after Dad had already been demonstrating his software, but William had expensive lawyers who knew how to make timelines blur. While Dad scrambled to defend himself legally, William launched a nearly identical product, marketed with the same language Dad had been using in his presentations. When potential investors saw that a major company was already offering the same technology, they lost interest in Dad's startup. The legal fees drained our savings. Dad had to let go of his remaining staff. The stress gave him chronic insomnia and chest pains that he ignored because he couldn't afford a doctor. My mother started working double shifts at the hospital just to keep food on our table. 6 months after William launched his stolen product, Dad collapsed in our driveway while taking out the trash. Massive heart attack. He was 43 years old. I was 12, standing at our kitchen window, watching paramedics try to bring him back to life on our front lawn. I remember thinking that if I concentrated hard enough, if I believed strongly enough, I could make his chest rise and fall again. But belief doesn't restart hearts, and Dad died before the ambulance reached the hospital. William's company went public 18 months later. The stolen software became the foundation of a tech empire worth billions. Meanwhile, my mother and I lost our house and moved in with my aunt in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than laughter. At Dad's funeral, I made a promise while dirt hit his casket. Someday, I would make William Hartwell understand what it felt like to lose everything. Someday, he would know that the person destroying his world was David Chen's daughter. It took me 15 years to keep that promise. I spent high school getting perfect grades while working nights at a grocery store to help Mom with rent. I studied computer science at State University on scholarships, graduating summa cum laude. I got my PhD in algorithmic development from a prestigious program, writing my dissertation on predictive market analysis. Every step was calculated, every achievement designed to build the exact resume William Hartwell's company would find irresistible. 3 years ago, I applied for a research position at Hartwell Dynamics under my married name, Luna Park. I'd been married briefly to a college classmate specifically so I could change my surname and avoid any connection to David Chen. The marriage lasted exactly long enough for the paperwork to process. William personally interviewed me for the position. He sat across from me in his glass-walled office, completely unaware that he was looking at the daughter of the man he'd destroyed. I answered his technical questions flawlessly, demonstrated my knowledge of advanced algorithms, and accepted his job offer with a firm handshake. "Welcome to the family," he said. I wanted to throw up. For 3 years, I've been the perfect employee. I solved problems nobody else could crack. I developed improvements to systems that saved the company millions. I worked weekends and holidays, staying late to debug code and optimize processes. I made myself absolutely indispensable. More importantly, I became close to William's son. Trevor Hartwell is 21 now, a business major at an elite university. When he started interning at his father's company during summers, I volunteered to mentor him. William was thrilled that his star researcher wanted to help shape his son's understanding of the business world. Trevor is nothing like his father. He's thoughtful, ethical, genuinely interested in using technology to help people rather than just accumulate wealth. During our mentoring sessions, I taught him about responsible leadership, about how truly great companies treat their employees and competitors with respect. I told him stories about small startups that get crushed by corporate giants, about brilliant inventors who lose everything to predatory business practices. I never mentioned my father specifically, but I could see Trevor absorbing every lesson, starting to question things he'd always taken for granted about his father's methods. Last month, Trevor came to me upset about something he'd overheard at a family dinner. His father had been bragging about acquiring a competitor's intellectual property years ago, about how he'd outmaneuvered some naive startup founder who didn't understand how real business works. "It doesn't sound right," Trevor told me. "Dad made it sound like he was proud of destroying someone's life's work. That's not innovation, that's just theft, isn't it?" I looked into his earnest, troubled eyes and felt something I hadn't expected: pride. This young man had developed the moral compass his father completely lacked. In trying to mentor him away from his father's path, I'd created someone who would judge William Hartwell by the same standards David Chen had lived by. The IPO launch is scheduled for next month. 3 years of development work, hundreds of millions in investor commitments, all dependent on the algorithm I've spent these years perfecting. An algorithm that, ironically, is based on the same principles my father had developed 15 years ago. William has no idea he's been building his new empire on the mathematical foundation of the man he murdered. Yesterday, when he slid that contract across my desk, I realized the moment had finally arrived. Not just the moment to walk away and watch his company crumble, but something much more devastating. Trevor was supposed to meet me after his father's office visit to discuss his senior thesis project. As William stood there waiting for my answer to his 10-time salary offer, I heard familiar footsteps in the hallway outside my office. "Mr. Hartwell," I said quietly, "before I give you my final answer, there's something you need to know about who I really am." His eyebrows lifted slightly, probably expecting me to reveal some competing job offer he could match. "My name isn't Luna Park, it's Luna Chen. David Chen was my father." The color drained from William's face so fast I thought he might collapse. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to speak underwater. 15 years ago, you stole his software and destroyed his company. The stress of fighting your legal challenges and watching his life's work disappear killed him. I was 12 years old when I watched paramedics try to restart his heart in our driveway. William grabbed the edge of my desk to steady himself. That's impossible. I'm David Chen's daughter, the same David Chen whose predictive algorithm became the foundation for your current success. The same man whose patents you challenged until he couldn't afford to defend them anymore. The same brilliant mind whose work you've been profiting from for over a decade. The footsteps in the hallway stopped. Through my office's glass wall, I could see Trevor standing frozen just outside the door, close enough to hear every word. William's gaze followed mine to his son, and I watched realization hit him like a physical blow. Trevor wasn't just overhearing this conversation by accident. This was happening exactly when and where I'd planned it. "Trevor," I said gently, not taking my eyes off William's face. "I'd like you to meet the real William Hartwell, the man who destroyed my family and built his fortune on my father's stolen work." Trevor's face went through the same progression of emotions I'd seen on his father's. But where William's expression settled into desperate calculation, Trevor's crystallized into something that made my heart ache with satisfaction. Disappointment. Pure, devastating disappointment in the man he'd looked up to his entire life. "Dad," Trevor's voice was barely a whisper. "Is she telling the truth?" William opened his mouth to respond, but I held up the contract before he could speak. "This is your offer, Mr. Hartwell. 10 times my salary to stay and save your IPO, to help you profit even more from my father's work, to be complicit in the same system that killed him." I tore the contract in half, then in half again, letting the pieces flutter to my desk like autumn leaves. I quit. The silence that followed was deafening. Trevor stared at his father with an expression I'd never seen before, like he was looking at a complete stranger. William's hands trembled as he reached for the torn contract pieces, as if putting them back together could somehow undo what had just happened. But I wasn't finished. 3 years of planning had led to this moment, and I intended to savor every second of William Hartwell's realization that his past had finally caught up with him. "There's one more thing you should know," I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "The algorithm your entire IPO depends on, the one that's supposed to make you billions, I've been building in a fatal flaw for the past 6 months. Something that won't surface in testing but will cause catastrophic failures once it's deployed at scale." William's face went completely white. "You're lying. You wouldn't sabotage your own work." "My own work?" I laughed, and it came out sharper than I intended. "This was never my work, William. This was always my father's work. I just spent 3 years perfecting his original vision and ensuring that when you try to steal from the Chen family again, it destroys you instead of us." Trevor stepped into my office, his eyes never leaving his father's face. "Dad, you need to explain this. Now." "Son, listen to me." William's voice cracked. "Business was different back then. Competition was fierce. Sometimes you had to make difficult decisions to survive." "Difficult decisions?" Trevor's voice rose. "You mean stealing someone's life's work and driving them to death?" I watched William scramble for words that could possibly justify what he'd done. But there weren't any, and we all knew it. "The flawed algorithm launches with your IPO," I continued calmly. "Initial performance will look perfect. Investors will be ecstatic. Stock prices will soar. But after approximately 30 days of real-world trading volume, the system will begin generating increasingly erratic predictions. By day 60, it will be recommending investments that lose money 90% of the time." William slumped into the chair across from my desk. "Luna, please. Think about what you're doing. This isn't just about me. Thousands of employees will lose their jobs. Retirement funds, college savings, people's entire futures are tied to this company." "You mean like my father's future was tied to his company? Like my mother's retirement was tied to our house that we lost when you destroyed us?" Trevor was staring at his father like he'd never seen him before. "How many other families, Dad? How many other people like Luna's father did you step on to build this empire?" The question hung in the air like smoke. William couldn't answer because we all knew the truth. David Chen wasn't the first, and he wouldn't have been the last. "I can fix this," William said suddenly, turning to me with desperate eyes. "I can make this right. Name your price. Anything you want." "I don't want your money." "Then what? What do you want?" I stood up and walked to my office window, looking down at the parking lot where employees were arriving for another day of work, completely unaware that their company's foundation was built on my father's grave. "I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything you've worked for. I want you to know that the person destroying your world is someone you created through your own cruelty. And most of all, I want your son to see exactly who you really are. Trevor's voice was quiet but steady. Luna, is there any way to stop the algorithm failure? I turned back to face them both. The flawed code is embedded in 17 different subroutines across 12 separate modules. Removing it would require rebuilding the entire system from scratch, which would take at least 8 months. Your IPO deadline is 3 weeks away. William buried his face in his hands. This will bankrupt the company. Everything I've built. Everything you built on my father's stolen work, I corrected. But the employees, Luna, the innocent people who work here, who have families to feed. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something that might have been doubt. I thought about Janet in accounting who always remembered my birthday, about Marcus in security who walked me to my car during late nights, about the cleaning staff who left little notes of encouragement on my desk. Then I thought about my father, dying alone in our driveway while William Hartwell celebrated his stolen success. You should have thought about innocent people 15 years ago. Trevor stepped closer to my desk. Luna, I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for what my father did to your family. But please, isn't there another way? Some kind of justice that doesn't destroy thousands of lives? Looking into Trevor's eyes was like looking into a mirror of my 12-year-old self. That same desperate hope that somehow, if you just believed hard enough, you could fix the unfixable. There is one way, I said slowly. Both William and Trevor leaned forward. I've documented everything. Every piece of stolen code, every copied algorithm, every patent that was challenged illegally. I have proof that this entire company is built on intellectual property theft. I also have recordings of William bragging about destroying small competitors, including my father. William's breathing became shallow. What are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice, William. You can let the IPO proceed and watch your company crash spectacularly when the algorithm fails, taking thousands of innocent people down with you. Or you can do something you've never done before in your entire career. Which is? Tell the truth. The office fell silent, except for the humming of computers and the distant sound of traffic below. You're going to call an emergency board meeting, I continued. You're going to confess that the core technology this company is built on was stolen from David Chen. You're going to publicly acknowledge that his work made your success possible. And you're going to establish a foundation in his name that helps small tech entrepreneurs defend themselves against corporate predators like you. William shook his head frantically. That would destroy my reputation. The board would fire me immediately. I'd lose everything. Exactly. Trevor was watching this exchange with growing understanding. But the company could survive if you tell the truth, couldn't it? The employees would keep their jobs? I nodded. If William comes clean before the IPO, the company can restructure, properly license the original technology posthumously from my father's estate, and rebuild with honest leadership. It would be humiliating and expensive, but not catastrophic. And if he doesn't? Then in 3 weeks, when the IPO launches, I'll release all my evidence to the financial press anyway. But by then, it will be too late to save the company or its employees. William looked back and forth between his son and me like a cornered animal. This is extortion. No, Trevor said quietly. This is justice. The disappointment in Trevor's voice was more devastating than any financial loss could ever be. I could see William finally understanding what he was really losing. Not just money or reputation, but his son's respect. The one thing he'd never considered might have value. I need time to think, William said. You have until 5 o'clock today, I replied. After that, I submit my resignation letter to the board, along with a detailed explanation of why I can no longer work for a company built on stolen technology. William stood up unsteadily and walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Why did you really come here, Luna? If you wanted to destroy me, you could have done it anonymously. Why reveal yourself? I thought about that question for a long moment, because I wanted you to know that David Chen's daughter grew up. I wanted you to understand that every brilliant algorithm you've profited from came from the mind of the man you killed. And I wanted you to realize that by mentoring your son, I've raised him to be everything you're not. Trevor stepped forward. Dad, Luna's right. About all of it. I've learned more about ethical leadership from her in 3 years than I ever learned from you. William's face crumpled. In that moment, he looked older than his 62 years. Older and smaller and more broken than I'd ever imagined he could be. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Luna. I never considered that David had a family. I told myself it was just business. My father used to say that how you treat people when you think nobody's watching is who you really are. Today, your son is watching." William left my office without another word. Trevor lingered for a moment, his eyes filled with something that looked like grief. "For what it's worth," he said, "your father would be proud of who you became." At 5:15 that afternoon, William Hartwell called an emergency board meeting. By 7 o'clock, news broke that Hartwell Dynamics was postponing its IPO indefinitely while conducting an internal review of its intellectual property foundations. By 9 o'clock, William had submitted his resignation as CEO. By the next morning, every major tech publication was running the story of how a billionaire CEO had confessed to building his empire on stolen technology, and how the daughter of his victim had spent 3 years methodically engineering his downfall. The company survived. Under new leadership and with proper licensing agreements, Hartwell Dynamics restructured and eventually went public 18 months later. Most employees kept their jobs. The David Chen Foundation for Ethical Innovation now provides legal support for small tech entrepreneurs facing corporate intimidation. Trevor transferred to a different university to finish his degree, telling reporters he needed to build his own identity separate from his father's legacy. We still exchange emails occasionally. He's planning to start a nonprofit focused on tech ethics after graduation. William Hartwell lost everything he thought mattered: his reputation, his fortune, his position in the industry. But he gained something he'd never had before: his son's respect for doing the right thing even when it cost him everything. As for me, I've started my own consulting firm helping small companies protect their intellectual property. The irony isn't lost on me that my first major client was a startup developing predictive algorithms. Some people might say my revenge was too harsh, that 15 years of planning and 3 years of deception make me just as ruthless as William. But when I visit my father's grave now, I can finally tell him that the man who killed him knows exactly what it feels like to lose everything to someone more clever and more determined. Justice doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like a 12-year-old girl who refuses to let her father's death be meaningless. Sometimes it takes 15 years and requires becoming exactly the kind of person your enemy would never suspect. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't destroying someone completely, but forcing them to live with the knowledge of who they really are. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Your support means everything to me, and it helps ensure that stories like my father's don't get forgotten. Share this with someone who needs to hear that patience and determination can defeat even the most powerful enemies. And please, tell me in the comments what justice means to you, because I read every single one and your words remind me why sharing this story was worth the wait.